In 1961, a mild-mannered Israeli vanished into Damascus, re-emerging as Kamel Amin Thabet, a fake Syrian tycoon who seduced generals, mapped artillery, and radioed 1,100 pages of secrets straight from the Ba'ath elite. Mossad's most elite spies aren't James Bond. They're accountants, engineers, and exiles who rewrote the fate of nations by risking everything behind enemy lines. Their operations toppled war plans, kidnapped Nazis, rescued hostages, and sabotaged nuclear dreams, changing history in ways most governments still won't admit. But where does brilliance end and recklessness begin? These are the real stories Mossad never wanted the world to know, and it all starts with a single knock in Tel Aviv. In the early years of statehood, Israel's security rested on a patchwork of ad hoc spy rings, desert runners, and ex-Haganah men clutching outdated pistols. The country's first prime ministers worried that a single misstep, one intercepted letter, one overheard phone call, could end the whole experiment. In March 1951, a brief secret memo created the Institute for Intelligence and Special Tasks. The name was deliberately dull, but in Hebrew, it became Mossad. Its mission was clear: gather, analyze, and act on information, anywhere, by any means necessary. At first, Mossad's arsenal was more psychology than gadgets. Most agents had no prior military rank, let alone spy credentials. Their greatest asset was the ability to blend, to disappear at a marketplace or a border checkpoint to persuade a hostile official to share whispered rumors over coffee. The agency traded on interpersonal skills, not fancy technology. Early assignments included forging travel documents, infiltrating refugee camps, and convincing German scientists not to build rockets for Egypt. There were few clean wins. Losses often meant capture or death, with no medals waiting back in Tel Aviv. From the start, Mossad operated outside Israel's borders with a freedom no other service could claim. In the 1950s, a young officer in Paris might arrange safe passage for Jews from Baghdad, while another coordinated arms shipments disguised as agricultural equipment. The targets ranged from Soviet bloc DOS diplomats to Nazi fugitives hiding in South America. Agents kept their own paper trails to a minimum. Even inside headquarters, compartmentalization was gospel. No one ever saw the whole picture. By the early 1960s, Mossad's reach spanned 3 continents. Its officers recruited church officials in Rome, businessmen in Buenos Aires, and local drivers in Beirut. The agency's first major coup involved intercepting speeches and diplomatic cables from the United Arab Republic, gleaned not by bugging rooms, but by winning trust at embassy cocktail hours. Mossad's leaders prized adaptability. One year, you were running courier drops in Istanbul. The next, you were an art dealer in Damascus. The risks were extraordinary. An agent operating in enemy territory knew that a single slip, a word out of place, a forgotten custom, could mean torture and a forced confession on state radio. As regional threats grew, Mossad's leadership doubled down on human sources. They tasked analysts to build psychological profiles of adversaries and mapped social networks years before the term became digital jargon. The methods were crude, but effective. A single operative's memory could redraw battle maps and rewrite war plans. By the time Eli Cohen crossed the border into Syria, Mossad had built a playbook for deep cover infiltration, using little more than charm, patience, and an encyclopedic recall for faces and facts. Internationally, Mossad was developing an outsized reputation. Western allies sought its insights on Soviet arms flows and Arab politics. But inside Israel, the agency stayed deliberately anonymous. Its failures were never discussed, its successes passed off as lucky guesses. Mossad's founding generation understood that invisibility was the real currency of power. The files from those early years remain mostly sealed, but one thing became clear by the end of the decade. The world's smallest intelligence service had grown into one of its most audacious, defined not by technology or budget, but by the nerve and resourcefulness of its people. In the spring of 1962, a new arrival rented a sunlit apartment in Damascus's Abu Romaneh Sanna neighborhood. He introduced himself as Kamel Amin Thabet, a businessman just back from a decade in Argentina, eager to join the right clubs and invest in the new Syria. Within weeks, secretaries in the defense ministry were whispering about him. The owner of the villa at number 8 Sharia May Saloon always seemed to have a full guest list. Army officers, radio hosts, and bath party climbers filled his living room, brandy glasses in hand, exchanging stories about promotions and border disputes. Every Friday, the laughter lasted late into the night, and nearly everyone left owing the host some small favor. Eli Cohen's tradecraft left little to gadgets. His best tools were a studied silence and a careful smile. He listened more than he spoke, never drank except to feign a tipsy cheerfulness, and remembered every detail. After a dinner party, he could recall which colonel bragged about new artillery batteries, down to the number of guns and their position on the Golan. He picked up the practice of surveying a room in one glance, then reconstructing it later from memory. Some nights, he wrote down everything he'd heard on slips of onion skin paper, hiding his notes in a hollowed-out jar of shaving cream. But most often, he relied on his head. His apartment overlooked Syrian army headquarters. From his window, Cohen tracked the comings and goings of generals, the rotation of guards, and the pattern of midnight convoys. When he spotted a new Soviet tank in the motor pool, he made a mental note. When a visiting engineer mentioned water diversion schemes north of Lake Tiberias, he cataloged names and schedules. His reports grew so detailed that over 4 years, he transmitted more than 1,100 pages of memos to Tel Aviv. Each message traveled by Morse code, tapped out from a transmitter disguised in a kitchen mixer, its thin wire antenna strung behind a curtain. He worked quickly. Syrian radio detection vans sometimes circled the block, looking for stray signals. Still, he risked extra transmissions if the news couldn't wait. Cohen's access expanded as Syria's political fortunes shifted. The 1963 Ba'athist coup brought old acquaintances from Buenos Aires into power, including General Amin al-Hafez. Suddenly, the affable investor became a fixture at military briefings and weekend hunting trips. One officer even brought him along on a tour of the Golan Heights fortifications. Cohen suggested planting eucalyptus trees for shade near the bunkers, a harmless gesture, or so the officers believed. Years later, Israeli gunners would use those trees as aim points. Not every method involved high drama. Sometimes Cohen's advantage came down to small tricks. He memorized military vehicle license plates, matched names to call signs, and learned which officers could be coaxed into indiscretion with the promise of a business deal. If a guest grew suspicious, he shifted the conversation to politics or offered another round. His cover was so robust that when a defense ministry official questioned his presence in a restricted area, a colonel brushed it off. "He's a patriot. He's one of us." The radio, the parties, the steady flow of favors, they all built into a pipeline of secrets. The more valued he became, the more invisible he was to suspicion. For a time, it seemed as though Mossad's best operative in Syria might never be unmasked. But every transmission carried a risk. The luxury of his address, the frequency of his social invitations, even his habit of sending detailed reports at all hours, all would become threads for Syrian counterintelligence to tug. Until then, Cohen's mastery of human nature and memory proved that, in the right hands, a dinner invitation could be as potent as a pistol. Natanz's plan for capturing Adolf Eichmann relied on precision, patience, and a network woven across Buenos Aires. 11 operatives arrived in small groups, each carrying a legend, an elaborate false identity, complete with forged passports and cover stories. Their safe houses were scattered across the city, 7 apartments and rented homes, each selected for its anonymity and proximity to Eichmann's daily path. Eitan insisted these bases look utterly ordinary. One had an alarm system and a reinforced cell, prepared for the possibility that their prisoner might have to be hidden for days. The logistics were daunting. 8 rental cars rotated through the team's hands, their plates swapped whenever a pattern threatened to emerge. One car followed Eichmann's bus route every evening, while another sat 2 blocks away, engine running. Radio silence was standard, broken only for scheduled check-ins or absolute emergencies. Even purchasing groceries was handled according to a strict rota, ensuring no agent became familiar to local shopkeepers. Surveillance required almost military discipline. Zvi Aharoni and his partner spent weeks mapping Eichmann's movements, clocking his return from the Mercedes-Benz plant at exactly 7:40 p.m. and marking every deviation. Each day's notes, how many steps from the bus stop to his gate, which neighbors greeted him if the dog barked as he passed, were double-checked at night in the safe house, then relayed to Eitan. The team rotated positions, swapping appearances and routines, so no single face became part of the neighborhood's memory. Forged documents underpinned every phase. Peter Malkin handled the disguises, while a specialist in the group produced passports, Argentine ID cards, and even the airline uniforms that would later be needed for extraction. Eitan required backstops for each alias, school certificates, rental agreements, even letters from fictitious employers in Europe. These weren't just props. If one cover was pierced, a second could be produced within hours. Transport coordination ran like clockwork. Drivers rehearsed routes in daylight and after dark, identifying potential choke points and places to disappear if things went wrong. Escape plans covered every scenario, including a backup route to a waiting ship if airport extraction failed. For Eichmann himself, the team prepared a mock El Al crew uniform and a sedative, ensuring he would look like just another employee on the tarmac. Every detail was checked and rechecked. The alarm detention cell had a false wall and a narrow window for ventilation, in case Eichmann needed to be hidden for an extended period. Meals and supplies were funneled through a single handler to avoid leaving a trail. Each operative knew only their immediate tasks and trusted Eitan's broader plan. As May approached, the pieces snapped together. The safe houses ready, vehicles fueled, and every member rehearsed for a job that would last only seconds, but whose ripples would be felt for decades. On the evening of May 11, 1960, a chill settled over the deserted road in San Fernando. Eichmann stepped off his bus, head down, unaware that a sedan idled just yards away. Peter Malkin approached, black leather gloves on, and spoke in careful Spanish. "Momentito, señor." That single phrase hung in the air for a split second before Eichmann spun to run. Malkin lunged. The 2 men crashed into a shallow ditch, grappling in the dust. Eichmann cried out, thrashing wildly as another agent seized his legs. In those 40 seconds, months of planning collided with raw adrenaline. The struggle was brief but chaotic. Malkin later recalled the rush of revulsion as his gloved hands gripped the man who had orchestrated the machinery of death. For a moment, he wrote, "I wanted to choke him." Dragging Eichmann to the waiting car, the team forced him onto the floor behind the front seat, one agent pressing a knee to his back while another secured his arms. He kept shouting until a cloth was stuffed into his mouth. As the sedan pulled away, another vehicle peeled out from up the street, ready to block pursuit if needed. The city's routine carried on, but for the men in those cars, time seemed to warp. Every stoplight a risk, every shadow a potential witness. Back at the safe house, the next phase began. Eichmann, shaken but still combative, was stripped of his ID and searched. The team worked in silence, each task rehearsed and precise, securing the doors, checking the phone lines, preparing the sedative. Within an hour, a doctor administered the injection, enough to keep him docile, not so much as to raise questions later. The agents dressed Eichmann in an El Al crew uniform, complete with cap and steward's wings. At sunrise, the plan was to move him under diplomatic cover, disguised as an airline employee, too ill to walk unaided. All the while, Eichmann sat handcuffed to a bed frame, fading in and out of the consciousness, the effects of the sedative deepening with each passing hour. News of his disappearance spread quickly. Argentine authorities launched a search, but the team had already rotated safe houses, changed vehicles, and scrubbed their tracks. Behind the scenes, political fallout gathered speed. Argentina's government filed a formal protest with the United Nations, accusing Israel of violating its sovereignty. The diplomatic complaint triggered weeks of heated debate and threatened to unravel quiet intelligence ties Israel had built in Latin America. Inside the Mossad, the trauma of the capture lingered. Malkin never wore those gloves again. The sensation, sweat, leather, and the memory of cold skin beneath remained with him for years. For the rest of the team, the extraction was both a technical triumph and a lesson in the thin line between justice and international scandal. Eichmann's 42nd abduction would echo from the corridors of Buenos Aires to the judgment bench in Jerusalem, reshaping international law and the rules of covert retribution. After Munich, Israeli leadership decided that vengeance would not come from public threats or press releases, but from cold, methodical action across Europe and the Middle East. Mossad's director assigned one man to build the machine: Mike Harari, a Palmash veteran with a reputation for ruthless creativity and a taste for improvisation. He called the campaign Wrath of God. The squads were a patchwork of quiet professionals, 15 operatives split into 5 teams, each named for a Hebrew letter. Each mel had its own logistics: safe flats in Rome or Athens, cash stashed under floorboards, and rental cars registered under a dozen fake names. Surveillance teams tracked targets for weeks, mapping grocery runs and lovers' trysts, always working to make the next kill look like an accident or a message. None of them left fingerprints. Most never even knew the names of their colleagues. Targets ranged from poets to bomb makers. In October 1972, Wael Zweiter, a PLO intellectual in Rome, was shot 11 times in his apartment building, 1 bullet for each murdered Israeli. Mahmoud Hamshari, Paris representative for Black September, answered his home phone and triggered a bomb disguised in the receiver. In Cyprus, Hussein al-Bashir died when 6 bombs exploded under his hotel bed. By the end of 1973, at least 15 names had been crossed off Mossad's list. Most hits happened in public, always quick, always final. The message traveled fast. Nowhere was safe, but precision has limits, and so does paranoia. In July 1973, a team flew into Norway convinced they'd found Ali Hassan Salameh, the Red Prince of Black September. Instead, they killed Ahmed Bouchiki, a Moroccan waiter who happened to speak French and share a passing resemblance to their real target. 4 Mossad agents fired 13 bullets as Bouchiki walked home from the movies with his pregnant wife. Local police arrested 6 members of the squad within days. Norwegian courts handed out prison sentences while papers splashed the story across Europe. Mossad's safe houses, cover accounts, and tradecraft manuals were burned or abandoned overnight. The fallout rippled through Israel's intelligence circles. Prime Minister Golda Meir ordered the assassination campaign shut down, temporarily. Harari, persona non grata in Norway, slipped out disguised as a fisherman. The agency's European operations, once feared for their reach, were now hobbled by burned networks and the suspicion that Mossad's appetite for revenge had outpaced its judgment. For Harari, the Lillehammer fiasco was a scar. For Mossad, it was a lesson in the price of error, one that would haunt future missions, even those that aimed to save lives instead of take them. In the summer of 1976, a packed Air France flight vanished from radar, diverted to Entebbe Airport in Uganda. The hijackers, members of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine and German revolutionary cells, separated the Jewish passengers and threatened mass execution unless dozens of prisoners were freed. As the deadline neared, Israeli leaders faced a dilemma that made every other rescue look straightforward by comparison. With no time to spare, they turned to their best problem solver, Mike Harari. Harari had recently returned from a storm of mistakes in Norway, but in Tel Aviv, nobody understood improvisation like he did. Within 48 hours, he was on a plane to East Africa, adopting the persona of an Italian businessman curious about local infrastructure. His cover opened doors that a diplomat never could. At Entebbe, he breezed through security, chatting with Ugandan officers, feigning interest in real estate deals, and taking mental snapshots of every corridor, guard post, and exterior wall. Harari's charm disarmed suspicion, but it was his memory that made the difference. By the time he left, he could sketch the terminal's layout from memory, locations of hostages, escape routes, the precise spot where Ugandan soldiers loitered with Kalashnikovs. He relayed that intelligence back to Israel, supplementing it with blueprints quietly obtained from a British engineering firm involved in the airport's construction. The combined notes formed a playbook for the rescue planners. Still, the plan required a miracle in logistics. The C-130 Hercules transports needed fuel for the round trip, but Ugandan airspace was unfriendly and most African countries had no interest in angering Idi Amin. Here, Harari's old Rolodex paid off. After a series of discreet calls, the Kenyan government agreed to allow the Israeli planes to refuel covertly at Nairobi. The arrangement was risky, coming just years after the oil crisis, but it bought the commandos the extra miles they needed. The mission itself was a masterclass in audacity. 4 aircraft flew low and dark beneath radar, touching down at Entebbe after midnight on July 4th. The first vehicle to roll down the ramp was a black Mercedes, a replica of Amin's personal car, an idea straight out of Harari's playbook. Commandos stormed the terminal in a flurry of gunfire, neutralizing the hijackers in under 5 minutes. The numbers echoed in global headlines. 102 hostages rescued, all 7 hijackers and over 30 Ugandan soldiers killed. Only one Israeli commando, Yonatan Netanyahu, died, shot as he led the final assault. Harari's reconnaissance made the difference between disaster and triumph. Every detail, from the position of the exits to the way the windows opened, had been mapped in his mind and transmitted to the teams. While most of Mossad's work faded into the background, this operation unfolded with the clarity of a spotlight. The world saw Israeli aircraft roaring through African night and battered hostages blinking in Nairobi sunlight. But the victory began with a man in an ill-fitting suit, sipping coffee with soldiers and memorizing every bolt and doorway. Harari's Entebbe was not about vengeance, but about risk, calculation, and the nerve to act when every option on paper looked impossible. In 1969, as London braced for another drizzly afternoon, a young Egyptian with a well-cut suit and a famous father-in-law dialed the Israeli embassy from a red telephone booth. The man, Ashraf Marwan, asked to speak with someone from intelligence. The embassy staff were used to prank calls and nervous would-be informants, but this voice, polished, insistent, stood out. Marwan left a contact number. His name quietly made its way through embassy channels, but bureaucracy and suspicion nearly let the moment slip past. Weeks went by. Only later, when a Mossad officer on unrelated business overheard the name in a car ride to Heathrow, did the gravity of the offer sink in. Marwan was no ordinary walk-in. As the son-in-law of President Gamal Abdel Nasser and a rising aide to Anwar Sadat, he had access to political conversations that shaped the map of the Middle East. Mossad officials arranged a discreet hotel meeting in London. Marwan came prepared, sliding over documents stamped as top secret by the Egyptian military. The papers passed the first test: real, sensitive, and timely. To probe deeper, the handlers set him a challenge: deliver specific details about Egypt's war plans and arms deals. Marwan delivered again. His answers matched signals intercepts and diplomatic chatter from other sources. The decision was made. He was the asset Mossad had been chasing for years. Still, the agency's veterans had learned caution from other so-called miracle sources who proved to be double agents. For months, analysts pored over Marwan's tips. Each scrap of intelligence was cross-checked against satellite photographs, embassy reports, even intercepted phone calls. The agency split into factions. Some believed Marwan's access was too good to be true. No one so close to the Egyptian president could simply walk into the Israeli net. Others, including Mossad chief Zvi Zamir, argued that the evidence spoke for itself. The reliability of his intelligence, the subtlety of his answers, and the risks he seemed to be taking all pointed to a genuine walk-in, not a deception artist. From that first meeting until 1973, Marwan became the agency's most valuable informant. His briefings arrived with the ink barely dry from Cairo, transcripts of Sadat's inner circle, outlines of Egypt's battle plans. Even the minutes from closed-door talks with Soviet leaders. Israeli leaders read Marwan's tips raw, sometimes before the prime minister's own advisors. He was paid handsomely for his work and kept his handlers at arm's length, always choosing the time and place for meetings, never allowing the routine to settle. The scale of his access changed the agency's risk calculus. Some within the Mossad's counterintelligence division warned about the danger of being played. The memory of past sting operations in Beirut and Paris still haunted the offices on King Saul Boulevard. Every false alarm Marwan sent, each coded message hinting at an imminent attack that never came, chipped away at trust. Yet the rewards kept coming. Confirmation of Egyptian unit deployments, details on new Soviet missile shipments, and rumors of Sadat's growing impatience with his generals. By the time Egypt and Syria massed their armies on Israel's borders in October 1973, Marwan's flood of information had shaped nearly every Israeli war game and contingency plan. Still, the old questions remained. Was the agency reading the mind of Egypt's leadership, or being fed precisely what Cairo wanted it to see? As the war drums sounded, the intelligence world's greatest riddle was alive and well, its answer locked behind the calm, unreadable face of Ashraf Marwan. Ashraf Marwan's value to Israeli intelligence was measured in urgent phone calls and late-night hotel meetings, but trust never came easy. In the space between wars, every warning he sent to Tel Aviv triggered a scramble, sometimes for nothing at all. Two separate times before 1973, Marwan's coded messages set off full-scale mobilizations of Israeli reserves. Army units rolled out, supplies stockpiled, families bracing at home. The cost of these false alarms reached $45 million, a staggering sum in an era when Israel's defense budget was already stretched. Each false start drew out the doubts within Mossad's own ranks. Was Marwan a genuine source risking his life, or a phantom asset feeding just enough truth to make the lies go unnoticed? Those questions never quite faded. Some officials insisted that only a man truly inside Sadat's circle could have delivered details about arms shipments and battle plans with such precision. Others, shaped by years of betrayal and blown covers, wondered if Marwan's very reliability was part of a broader Egyptian deception. The false warnings didn't just drain resources, they shifted attitudes. The more often Marwan cried wolf, the less likely Israel's commanders were to leap at his next alert. When October arrived, the instinct to double-check, to wait for confirmation proved costly. For Marwan, the balancing act grew more perilous with every year. He protected his meetings fiercely, setting the agenda and refusing to see anyone but his original handler for decades. Money flowed in, enough to build a fortune in London real estate, but so did the pressure. After the war, rumors swirled in Cairo and Tel Aviv alike. Was he a hero, a traitor, or both? Even within Mossad, debates over his loyalty sparked bitter feuds. Files were sealed, then leaked, as old rivals tried to settle the matter in the press. In June 2007, long after the last coded telegram, Marwan fell from the balcony of his London apartment. The timing, just days after the Israeli press identified him as the Angel, raised immediate suspicion. British investigators found no clear evidence of suicide, but also no sign of a struggle. Witnesses claimed to see two men with Mediterranean features on the balcony that day, but crucial items, like Marwan's shoes, vanished from police custody. The inquest delivered an open verdict, unable to rule out foul play, unable to declare intention. Officially, the cause of death remains undetermined. The mystery of Marwan's final moments echoes the questions that haunted his entire career. Decades after his first phone call from a London booth, the full truth of his allegiances remains locked in a web of conflicting testimonies and missing clues. His story is less an answer than a mirror, reflecting back the uncomfortable reality of espionage, that even the best intelligence is never quite as certain as those who depend on it would like to believe. Mir Dagan took over Mossad at a time when Iran's nuclear ambitions were no longer speculation. but a timeline measured in centrifuge spin cycles. For decades, the agency's strength had been built on people, agents who could read a room or intercept a secret at a border checkpoint. Under Dagan, the rules changed. The new Mossad became known as a mob on motorcycles, a phrase he used to describe operatives who could strike across continents and vanish before alarms sounded. But the real transformation happened behind the scenes, in the fusion of classic tradecraft with digital sabotage. The first glimpse of this new approach came not from a gunshot or a car bomb, but from lines of code. In June 2010, cybersecurity researchers uncovered a worm later named Stuxnet. It had been in the wild for months, possibly years, before anyone realized what it was doing. Stuxnet was more than malware. It was a weapon engineered for a single target: the centrifuges within Iran's Natanz nuclear enrichment facility. No ordinary virus. It exploited 4 unreported flaws in Microsoft Windows, slipped in through infected USB drives, and then lurked, searching for Siemens Step 7 software, the same system guiding cascades of spinning uranium machines deep underground. Once Stuxnet found its mark, it quietly rewrote the rules of sabotage. It forced the IR-1 centrifuges to speed up from their normal 1064 Hz to 1410, then dropped them to a crawl, all while feeding Iranian engineers false readings that showed everything was running smoothly. The aluminum tubes spun themselves to pieces. By mid-2010, international inspectors recorded the sudden removal of nearly 1,000 centrifuges, almost 1/5 of Iran's operational capacity, without a single missile or commando setting foot inside Natanz. Surveillance footage confirmed the systematic dismantling. 11 out of 18 cascades disconnected, machines loaded onto trucks, their insides warped beyond repair. The operation's sophistication left experts stunned. Stuxnet's code recognized only the exact variables of Natanz equipment, ignoring everything else. It even used stolen digital certificates to pass as legitimate software. Technical forensics traced its origins to at least 2009, possibly earlier, with infection waves that spread through Iran's tightly guarded networks, likely carried in by unwitting employees or contractors. Each new variant refined its targeting and evaded detection. The worm's presence wasn't just a technical marvel, it was an intelligence victory that hinted at deep knowledge of Iran's procurement chains, internal workflows, and the very layout of its secret facilities. But the digital war did not replace the human element. As engineers scrambled to recover, another front opened across Tehran's streets. Between 2010 and 2012, 5 top Iranian nuclear scientists were assassinated in rapid succession. Masoud Ali Mohammadi, a quantum physicist, died when a motorcycle bomb detonated outside his home. Majid Shahriari, a specialist in nuclear chain reactions, was killed by a remote-controlled explosive stuck to his car by motorcyclists. Dariush Rezainajad, an electrical engineer working on high-voltage switches, was gunned down in front of his daughter's kindergarten. Mostafa Ahmadi Roshan, deputy director at Natanz, died the same way as Shahriari. A magnetic bomb, a motorcycle, a busy Tehran street. Each hit followed the same choreography. Months of surveillance, precise timing, and escape routes that left local security baffled and the Iranian nuclear project reeling. Dagan never discussed specifics, but his philosophy was clear. Mossad would not wait for enemies to draw first blood. The agency's new doctrine combined digital disruption with surgical strikes. One moment a cascade of centrifuges destroyed by a hidden worm. The next, key scientists vanishing from project rosters. American intelligence later confirmed what Tehran suspected. The sabotage was orchestrated, relentless, and aimed at buying Israel the years it needed. This was the most visible phase of what Dagan called the war between the wars. A campaign designed not for headlines but to slow down, distract, and undermine. While officials in Europe debated sanctions and diplomats gathered in Vienna to argue over uranium stockpiles, Mossad's mob made sure that Iran's nuclear clock never ticked quite as fast as it should. The rules had changed. Sabotage was now a blend of silicon and steel, of code and bullet, crafted to leave no single signature but a trail of broken machinery and empty labs. Espionage, for all its calculated glamour, has always blurred the boundary between protection and peril. Mossad's greatest triumphs, Cohen's charm in Damascus, Eitan's meticulous planning in Buenos Aires, Harari's improvisation at Entebbe, Dagen's digital gambits in Natanz did more than outwit enemies. They left civilians caught in the crossfire, unseen but never unaffected. Each operation, however surgical on paper, risked lives far from the intended target. 13 bullets ended Ahmed Buchiki's life on a Norwegian street because he shared a language and a passing resemblance to a wanted man. Paris apartment walls still echo with the blast that killed Mahmoud Hamshari, just steps from his family. Tehran's morning traffic was interrupted by a motorcycle bomb meant for a nuclear physicist, but it also took out the window panes of a dozen nearby shops. The price paid in secret is rarely tallied in public. Documents catalog the hits, the captured, the destroyed centrifuges, but not the ripple effects. One scientist's death meant another left for Canada. The wrong man's funeral in Lillehammer haunted Mossad's ranks for a decade. Each year, governments write condolence letters, award medals, and quietly settle hospital bills for the collateral wounded. The files show that for every operation broadcast as precise, at least a handful generated lawsuits, diplomatic expulsions, or anonymous threats delivered to an embassy door. Technology promised cleaner hands. The shift from coaxing secrets at cocktail parties to planting zero-day worms promised to keep boots and consciences clean. No bullets, just corrupted code. Yet even Stuxnet's designers could not prevent the virus from leaking into systems far beyond Iran. The digital fallout infected computers in Indonesia, India, and even at Chevron's United States facilities. Codes once written for one target now scan millions of faces, flagged by algorithms that never sleep. As of 2025, Israel's own security apparatus will pilot Dragnet AI systems that cross-check biometric, financial, and travel data for entire populations. Already, facial recognition cameras dot the highways from Beersheba to Haifa, calculating the odds of a threat with each license plate or glance. The old tradecraft relied on a clever hand and a steady nerve. Now, one line of faulty AI code can mislabel an innocent traveler, triggering a midnight raid or weeks of house arrest. In Gaza, the logic of preemptive action has devolved into permanent surveillance. In Tehran, scientists sleep in different apartments every night, their children taught to spot motorcycles on the morning commute. The world asks for perfect safety, but ends up with invisible costs. The chilling effect on dissent, the silent errors that never make the headlines, the neighborhoods that learn to keep their curtains drawn. Some within Mossad argue the calculus remains unchanged. Charm or code, the mission is to defend against threats others cannot even name. Yet the margin for error has only grown thinner. The more intelligence leans on cameras and algorithms to preempt risk, the harder it becomes to recognize when the system itself has overstepped. Each advance in targeting creates a new blind spot, each data sweep a fresh risk for the wrong person, to pay the ultimate price. The lesson is clear. If rarely stated, aloud, every gain in security carries a price, often paid in places the planners never visit. Mossad's legacy teaches that the real test isn't how many enemies are stopped, but how many unintended victims are spared. As the agency moves deeper into the age of AI-assisted surveillance, the essential question remains: how many invisible costs are too many for a nation's peace of mind? Over 6 decades, Mossad's most elite spies have forged a legacy that is both extraordinary and shadowed by unanswered questions. Eli Cohen transmitted over 1,100 pages of Syrian secrets before his execution in 1965, shaping the outcome of the Six-Day War. Rafi Eitan and Peter Malkin's team captured Adolf Eichmann in 1960, leading to unprecedented international fallout and the first televised trial of a Nazi war criminal. Mike Harari's operations delivered both vengeance and redemption, from the missteps of Lillehammer to the success of Entebbe, where 102 hostages were freed. Ashraf Marwan's warnings changed the course of the Yom Kippur War, but his true allegiance remains disputed, his 2007 death unresolved. Under Mir Dagan, Mossad sabotaged Iran's nuclear program, integrating cyber warfare and targeted strikes. Yet, many files remain classified, and the full cost, ethical and civilian, of these actions is still debated. As intelligence methods evolve with new technology, the line between security and risk grows thinner. What is clear? Mossad's operatives have altered the course of history, leaving behind a record measured in both victories and moral ambiguities.